So, Mr. Joe Brumm, I first met quite late in 2018. I have, at the time, young children, and there was a new TV show out, and it really spoke to me. And I wrote an email to the studio and said, this is a really, really good TV show. As someone who understands the developmental variance between 2-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds, this show speaks to me, and better, it's about the town that I live in. And I was expecting a generic response from the studio, which I got, and then I received another email, and it was from Joe. So, ladies and gentlemen, Joe has shown immense kindness to me and my family and given a tour of the Bluey studios, for which I'm eternally grateful. And he's now made even more time for us to be here today, part of DFTB 22 Refresh. So without further ado, the creator of Bluey, Mr. Joe Brumm.
All right, wasn't expecting that, but thank you. Sorry. Yeah, look, g'day. Thank you, Henry, for the invitation. I've spent a lot of time amongst a few of you. Unfortunately, my daughter, has been in and out of hospital, not for a few years now, and I've got the utmost respect for the way you work. And as a fly on the wall in hospitals, I would take everything in, the way doctors would relate to nurses, the way nurses would relate to doctors, and the way both would relate to the patient and the parents. And so maybe in Bluey you can see that come out every now and then. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I found myself in my little studio at home, working away at my own little company that I'd started 5 or 6 years previous with my 2 daughters, and really enjoying what I was doing, making enough money, I was earning a living, everything was going okay, but I was just sort of missing something. And to give you an idea of what I was missing, when I explain it, it answers the question I get asked a lot, which is, how did you come up with the idea for Bluey? Now, the idea for Bluey is some talking dogs, all right? Talking cartoon dogs. It took me an afternoon to come up with the idea for Bluey. But the bigger question is, why did I come up with Bluey? I was perfectly happy working in this show, but I think I wasn't perfectly happy with it. There was something I was missing. Now, I am an animator. I grew up drawing as a kid. I was born in Winton and moved to Cairns in Brisbane. I was just a normal Queensland kid, but I loved drawing, and all I would do was draw, and that drawing led me to study animation at Queensland College of Art with Benny. And I then was lucky enough to get a good job where I got to learn even more on the job, hand drawing animation, back when we did it on paper. And then moved to London, where I sort of was thrown into this world of established animation. Brisbane is do-it-yourself. London was decades of an established industry. And I loved it. And I worked on a lot of great shows and with some excellent people, and I earned a living, and I traveled around Europe, and it was fantastic. But most of the shows I worked on weren't, some were better than others, but most weren't particularly well written. It's pretty common in film and TV. You don't always work on really beautifully written projects. And what happens when you work in a studio like that is everyone holds back a bit, and an air of kind of cynicism, I guess, about the kind of higher-ups and the scripts you get sort of permeates the work environment. It's just a comment here or a little eye roll there at a joke, that is in the scripts. And it's not enough to sort of make you want to leave the job. You still are an animator. It's still a tremendously sort of fun and challenging job. But I never knew what was missing until about 2005. I got a job with a company called Tiger Aspect, which was started before I got there by a couple of guys who mortgaged their house on a little punt of an idea that they had to form their company. And that little idea was Mr. Bean, which turned out to be a bit of a goer. And they formed Tiger Aspect, and Tiger Aspect made a show called Charlie and Lola, which was a beautiful show. It was led by a really talented, very stylish creator, Lauren Child, who had a real, I guess, sort of visual integrity to her. It was led by Claudia Lloyd, who just created a real family environment in this studio, and it was directed by Kitty Taylor, who is still the best director I've ever worked for. And it was 3 seasons of the most. It was right on Soho Square, and it was just the most magical experience because the show was good, and we all knew it was good, and people in our lives who had kids were watching it, and they were loving it, and it was this wholly new experience for most of us where this thing we were making didn't just disappear off into the ether, and the effect it had, I'm sure, maybe at times, or maybe right now you've seen that in your work environment where I guess the motivation becomes a bit more intrinsic, I guess, and you see everyone just rise and do their best animation and work harder and work longer purely because the person next to them's doing it, and you're all doing it because people are watching the show and they're loving the show, and it becomes its own fuel for you. And that was what happened with Charlie and Lola, and it really was a magical experience. And we formed friendships which are still going now, and it was like we traveled around Europe with little groups of us, and we went to the pub every night, and it's just all these small things, but it was, when I think about it now, it was just a beautiful feeling working on that show. And what's more, the director, she knew how to give you praise. She would, most stuff you would do your scenes on other studios and they'd just disappear, right? Whereas she would come to your desk, she would watch it with you, and if she liked it, she would laugh, or she would give you feedback. And it sounded like some sort of, abused animator, but it was the first time that had ever happened, where your director, this woman who you totally are in awe of, is there looking at your work and praising it. And I still remember the mindset. It was like, well, if you like that, you wait till you see what I can do next, And a whole studio of people doing that is a really magical place to be. So here I found myself 5 years ago, as I said, at my desk with my studio, and I was enjoying myself, but I was missing that feeling. And, there's a lot of smart people in this audience, I'm sure. And I think you might know the secret to humans, a few of you, which is it's not the drugs, it's not the booze, it's not the trophies, it's the feeling that those things elicit within us that we chase and we get hooked on. And I wanted that feeling again. I wanted that feeling like you're part of something bigger than yourself. And just being in a room full of animators again, So I made a little pilot at nights, and with my with an animator I'd worked on in Charlie and Lola, Kiwi fella. He was in Auckland, and at nights we just went about it. We'd work all day, we'd sort our kids out, and then we'd work into the night. We'd work through tendinitis, and we made a little 1-minute pilot. And for Bluey, and I still remember halfway through, it was about 10 o'clock one night, and it was, the pilot was Bluey on the swings, and my kids would always say, push me all the way around. And so this was Bandit pushing Bluey all the way around. And at one point I was struggling to get this little thing to work. Little display order, we call it. Bluey's arm to be in front of a chain, but the hand to be behind it. Anyway, it's just one of those boring things you do when you animate. And I couldn't get it. These were new rigs we're using, and I just couldn't get it. And I remember thinking to myself, look, no one knows you're doing this except for Mark. You're earning plenty of money, you're happy with your job, just give it away, why are you doing this? And I don't know why, probably because I've got very hardworking parents, probably because of, God knows what, past karma. I can't put my finger on it, but I said, I'm going to keep going. And we pushed through, we finished that little pilot, and then Fast forward a year and a half later, we got Henry walking through our office with his kids who love the show. Now, it didn't come easy. That when you agitate for 10 years, and I did agitate, I knew I had something like Bluey in me for a chance at it, and then someone gives it to you, which happened to us at the Asian Animation Conference. We pitched a slightly longer pilot, and it then became basically a bidding war between every major network in the world wanted this show. And I was thinking, well, this makes my job easier now. But suddenly someone says, all right, this thing you've said you've been able to do all these years, here's $6 million, you need to make 52 episodes of it. And, it was a very focusing moment, to put it mildly. But what I did, I surrounded myself, the first step, surrounded myself with 5 or 6 or 7 of my most trusted friends that I'd worked with, some of them 20 years previous, some I'd met at university. I gave them all a call and I said, what's going on? And I said, I need your help. And they all came. They all came to Brisbane and were totally up for it. And it made all the difference. I started to believe, you know what, not only I think can I do this, but I think this will be something, And so we got to work. We made this all in Brisbane, and that's what I'd learned on Charlie and Lola, that they made their show script to screen under the one roof, thanks to a brilliant breakthrough in animation software. They make it all on the one roof rather than do pre-production here, and usually we get sent overseas to another country to split up the sort of subsidies. But I'd seen that it works best under one roof. You write your scripts, your storyboards, and you animate, and you do it all under that one roof, and communication is just so much better. The acting is more real, it's more local. The director can get their hands on the acting, and if you want to make a change, a big change, you can quickly and easily do it. But that comes with its own challenges. We had to hire all those people. So we hired all these kids, basically, and they were kids. They were in their 20s. They were, kids who had just finished uni, some of them who were still going at animation. And when we first started, we had my little team of veterans who were working away, and we were training these new kids up. And because no one used our software, so every person we hired, we had to train for 4 weeks to get this software in. So we never had spare people. It wasn't like a footy team where someone gets injured and you run someone off the bench. We didn't have a bench. The best we could do was bring someone in from the UK, and all the sort of visa dramas that would go with that. But we had to train them all up. And I still remember these kids on the first day we were training them. We had these veterans working here silently, and these kids, during the breaks, they would get up, and it was like they were at art college again. They'd be making noise. And at one point, I looked across and they were drawing on the walls. And, the first of these sort of transformations in me, where I had to just sit them down and say, guys, you are at work now. This is no longer university. And if you can see this group now, they're unrecognisable. They are the veterans now, and it's so satisfying. But we had all sorts of challenges. It was, there's a real, I can't remember the name of the book, but, humans, I guess we tend to be over-optimistic in what we're going to achieve, and I definitely was in terms of how much I thought we can animate per week, per animator. I was put it around the 30-second mark, but in reality, we were kind of around 15 seconds. So our first season was pretty brutal, and it was a very exhausting first season. Season 2 was slightly easier. Season 3 now it's never easy, but it's as easy as it's been. But that first season was like World War I. And but this team, we got through it together. We made sure our mentors worked with each person. We worked on their problems. We had a lot of it wasn't just animation problems, it was personality problems and all these things, but nothing that's new to any of you, I'm sure. But we got there, and we delivered this season, and just slowly over that year, I started seeing it again. I started seeing this group start to believe in the show that they were making. And there wasn't any cynicism. From the very first animatics, they were into the scripts, and this process started to happen again. And then we released the show, and it went crazy. And we've won 2 Logies and 3 actors and an Emmy, and it's broken all the ABC iView records. And inexplicably, we're number 1 trending show on Disney Plus in the US. And that's not kids' show, that's counting, that's on that platform. And I didn't do anything to change, thank you. I didn't do anything to change it. It's just the show that was going to make me laugh. And yeah, okay, the Americans censored vast chunks of it, but that's a mark of pride for me because I didn't change it, and I think that does give hope to other Australian creators, to be honest. But the show did really well, and what happens when a show does that is that your animators, when they tell people that they work on Bluey, people yell out that they love them, okay? And their friends say, oh, my niece loves that show. Their parents tell their friends, my son or my daughter works on Bluey. And there's such a pride that wells up in them. And I was starting to see that. And, all the successes have been great, and they definitely don't discount them. But there was that feeling again in the studio. But the thing was, there was a price. It was different this time. I could see that feeling within them. But for me, when I was at Charlie and Lola, the best I can describe it, it's like you spend your life going to Christmas, but the first time you ever host a Christmas, it was like that. It was, Charlie and Lola was, yeah, all right, let's go bowling, let's do this. Yeah, my computer's not working, sort that out for me, will you? And whereas suddenly we were the bosses, and it was, the responsibility was on you. The tears, when they came, and they did come, and they came from people who I thought were unbreakable, but they eventually came. They were on your, that was on me, really. This was my show. This was my level of quality that I demanded, I guess. So I had to take them. And it was extraordinarily difficult, but on the flip side, there was this feeling which you didn't even get close to on Charlie and Lola, which was seeing this crew of animators, what they'd achieved, and feeling like you were part of that, and feeling proud of that, and seeing the people in their lives proud of them. And it was and is one of the, I think when all the awards, when we stop getting invited to the Logies 10 years from now, it will be the thing that still stays with me. And what I'm hoping is that some of those animators, maybe it's another 10 years, maybe it's 15, maybe it's in a couple of years, even if it's just one of them, is sitting in their little office in 10 years and starts missing the feeling that we created on Bluey. Because I know that you miss it when it's gone, and that they then come up with their show about talking cats or whatever it is. And then they ring their friends and they say, I need some help. So look, that's the story of Bluey. What I've learned about stories is you basically, when all's said and done, you take all the machine guns out and all the love scenes. You're watching one character move from point A to point B. And the point A I've moved from is that there was always this feeling I had something like this in me, and it's a really annoying feeling because it always taps you on the shoulder and says, yeah, you haven't done that thing that's in you yet. And I feel now like I've done it. And this point B for me, it's not happiness, it's just relief. And it's you get left alone. I can meet people now, and I'm sorry to say this, but the first thought you have isn't, is this person, can they help me get to point B? And now it's gone. I've sort of proved it to myself that I can do it, and it's a lovely, peaceful feeling. And I hope you, if you've experienced that or you're yet to experience that, I hope, circumstances conspire for you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, so much for that insight into what life is like as a creator. We do have some time for some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and one of our roving mics will chase you down. We've got a question up the front.
I have a question about leadership. So sort of you hinted in that talk that there was a burden of leadership in both maintaining that balance between quality but also protecting the people who work for you. And I was wondering if you had any lessons for other leaders about how you would approach that differently maybe now.
Yeah, that gets to the heart of it, really. It's this weird thing when you're doing something like this. I'll mess the phrase up, but asking forgiveness or permission. You know what I'm trying to say. But part of you feels like when everyone's going really hard at it, you feel like, look, when this is done, you'll be proud of this. You'll be glad you put all this hard work in. There's that over there, but then there's also just, look, these people. This is still people's lives, and this is too hard. That has been and continues to be, I guess, the hardest thing in a show where you are encouraging your staff to care about it. Is that vibe, I guess, can sometimes create the conditions where people just go hardcore, and Bluey is and was a very hard-working show. So I guess what did I learn? What lessons are there? It's that ultimately you have to pull back on the quality to protect the people, and that may sound really obvious, but it's often difficult to do. You have to weigh it up with which people. Some people, are just right up for it. But generally, what we always tried was just to put some sanity into this. Sometimes you would sit back and go, hang on, this is just a kid's cartoon after all. But it's a really tricky one because some people thrive and some you just could not pull back. They were, usually single and young and all that. And like I was in Charlie and Lola, I could not work hard enough. I just had no responsibilities. But you got to meet everyone where they're at. We had parents and we had all sorts, and so we would always try and balance that out as good as possible. Season 1 we didn't do it. Season 2 we did a little bit better, and Season 3 started to make some progress.
Hi Joe, thanks so much for that. I guess my question to you is, part of the heart of what you do and probably the heart of what all of us in this room do is human connection. And I guess my question to you is, in creating something as iconic as Bluey is, how did you tap into that human connection to get a whole room of adults probably addicted to watching what, in your words, are a kids' show?
Thank you. Well, look, two things. One bit of writing advice I got was that thing you want to do as a young, filmmaker is you want to do. You get upset at happy endings, and you want to. That's not what life's like, man. I want my heroes to die. But it's, because that's what reality is, and it's a young person's thing. I think what I learned once I had kids, and probably the right room for this is that. Life's difficult, and when you have kids, you lose all control over, circumstances, and you're at the mercy. Your nervous system is hooked up to theirs, and that's fine when things are going well, but often it doesn't go well, and what's the word? I guess you just get humbled, and you look at, you realise that little lesson I learned in writing really, I guess I internalised it properly. It was like, look, life gives you enough sad endings. Bluey, and I think entertainment and art has a purpose where it just is relief for someone for 7 minutes to escape to, and you know it's not real. You know life doesn't work that way, but I think sometimes your spirit needs to just live in somewhere that does for 7 minutes. I hope that answers your question.
We've got time for one more question.
Hi, it's such a pleasure to meet you. Couple of questions. At what stage... I've got the floor. I'm just curious, at what stage did you start putting cameras in all of our houses to get the storylines that just hit so close to home, particularly Sticky Gecko? And I was wondering if you have a story behind the inspiration for Bandit, who we all admire as a dad figure.
Yeah, well, look, all I did was write what was happening in my life, and it turns out kids are kids, right? They just don't want to go in a straight line. And what I tried to do with an episode like Sticky Gecko is interrogate it a bit. Why doesn't a kid respect your time and whether you're late? And at a certain age, you guys know, you have to learn what time is. And what I always am fascinated and a little jealous of in that app is that, they haven't figured out what time is yet and what being late is. And what I wouldn't give to be able to access that state of consciousness every now and then. Bandit was based, he's just a collective, I guess, of myself and my brothers and all my mates and everyone we saw. And the best way to illustrate it is one of my mates, when he had his kid, he was, in the hallway, and his wife was, I think, in the room, and he was there with his dad and his uncles. And a nappy needed changing. I think, his wife said, "Oh, I need to change a nappy," and I won't say his name, but he was like, "Oh yeah, all right." And his uncles stopped him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just changing." And they said, "No, what are you doing?" And in that was like the difference, I guess, in the generations. And for my mates and myself, you didn't care what anyone thought. There was just work to do, and you started doing it. So I guess Bandit's just come from observation of. He definitely didn't come from trying to make any statement. I was too busy, packing it to worry about trying to teach anyone anything. He just came from, when you go to write things, you just write what would come out of your mouth. Cool. Thank you very much.